Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of Golf and Politics. Rob, Cory, I'd say welcome back, Cory. I missed the last episode. We're sorry for the passing of your aunt, and I hope the funeral honored her life. But welcome back to the show, and we're just excited to have a fantastic guest. But before we get into that, Scottie Scheffler and Nelly Korda. What do you guys think? I mean, this is just unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, hate to put anybody in the same sentence as Tiger Woods, but we're seeing two golfers here dominate like we haven't seen
Team
in quite some time.
tailor-made.
That's right.
I think we need to pump the brakes on the Tiger Woods talk. I think Scottie is a hell of a player. I think he's having a world-class season, definitely on his way to a future Hall of Fame career. But really, over the last 15 years, no one has been able to step up to fill the Tiger void for a period of time. Rory came out and won 3 or 4 majors and then dropped off. Koepka is probably the closest, won 5 majors over a period of time. Jordan Spieth won a couple and then dropped off. So every time one of these guys steps up and has a big year or 2 big years, we start talking about Tiger Woods and GOAT this and GOAT that. But I think Scottie's got the potential to have a wonderful career. But I think comparing anybody to Tiger Woods is premature and probably puts too much pressure on their back. You know, I think let's see what Scottie can do. But, I mean, he's certainly the best in the world right now.
I don't disagree with that, Rob. But, you know, also the just winning 4 times in 1 month for the most part. And the other time he didn't win, he finished second and missed a 5-footer to go to that playoff. Corey, I think interrupted you there. I mean, it's a stretch of golf that's just unbelievable that I guess the only thing you can do is compare it to somebody like Tiger. So I'm not trying to say that he's the next Tiger Woods, but my goodness, it's fun to watch. And
I also think we need to take a step back and have a debate eventually, because there's a lot of guys who are able to step their game up and who are given an opportunity on a PGA Tour because some of these guys went to live and they don't have an opportunity to compete. So, you know, you could have that debate too when you're missing the Rahms, the Dustin Johnsons, and the Koepkas who aren't competing week after week. So it gives opportunity and gives other folks. I'm not saying that Scheffler wouldn't have won, but it does give a rise and opportunity for folks like that Akshay Bhatia and Denny McCarthy, who's a local Washington, D.C., Georgetown prep guy, to kind of rise up and have an opportunity to win. So, and we could save that debate for another time.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess we don't want to make the mistake of saying there's an asterisk next to what he's doing, but it is fun to watch. There's just a lot of great golfers in the world, and like I've said all along, I just want to see more golf on television. I want to see the best players playing against each other, and watching Nelly Korda and Scottie Scheffler right now is unbelievable. But let's get to our guest for tonight. And you know, we're recording this on April the 22nd. We did not plan this whatsoever, but this is the 30th anniversary of the passing of former President Richard Nixon, and we have a former Nixon staffer today. And Rob, thank you for arranging our guest today, and why don't you go ahead and take it over for the introduction.
Well, if we're going to have a podcast about golf and politics, there's nobody better than Wayne Valis. I know I said the exact same thing last week about Congressman Marty Russo, but I mean it again when it comes to Wayne Valis. Wayne was a senior staffer, the guy behind the guy, whispering in the president's ear to Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Vice President George H.W. Bush, and Ronald Reagan, where he held his most senior position in the 1980s. And over the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, has run a very successful lobbying and consulting firm, Valis and Associates, here in Washington, D.C. He's built quite a business and has represented a who's who of every Fortune 100 company you could think of over the years. There isn't a major economic debate that he's not been intimately involved in. Beyond his political resume, he has quite the golf resume. Wayne was one of the early members of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Club, RTJ, in Northern Virginia. RTJ has hosted 4 President's Cups, and Wayne has been involved in all of those. And we'll have the Solheim Cup at RTJ this fall. He is also probably the unofficial American mayor of St. Andrews, Scotland, where he also resides for part of the year. He's a member of the distinguished St. Andrews Golf Club and the Crail Golfing Society. And he also spends some time throughout the year golfing at his clubs, the Dye Club in Myrtle Beach and the Half Moon Bay Resort in Jamaica. And I don't know what else I can say about Wayne other than he's a terrific golfer. He has more holes in one than all of us combined. His stories are legendary, and he has a beautiful, beautiful voice. And if we could get Wayne to sing for us at some time tonight, I'll give everybody a dozen golf balls. But with that, I guess I'll start with the first question for Wayne Valis. Tell us about your golf game, and give us some good stories about your time working in the White House.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Rob. I hope we've taped that. That'll be my eulogy. I don't know, and I'm heading for that. I'm 80 this year. I've had a great life because I met guys like you. It's been wonderful. You want me to do politics? Or, by the way, let me just say this. We had the President's Cup at RTJ. And one of the people who was in evidence who went to all the rounds was a gentleman named Byron Nelson, who later I was to take on a tour through the White House. And we had been discussing modern great golfers, and Gary Player and Tiger had won 5 in a row. They'd won 5 tournaments in a row. And so I mentioned to Mr. Nelson, you had a pretty good year in 1945, didn't you? He said, yeah. Once I made my money, I retired. I stopped playing golf. I just wanted to buy a ranch, get enough money to buy a ranch in Texas. And I said, you won quite a few that year, didn't you? He went, yeah, I was lucky. I said, how many tournaments in a row did you win? He said, 11. And just so you guys know that no golfer has won more than 11 tournaments in a year. Tiger did that. Snead did that. Ben Hogan did that. And that year that he won 11 in a row, he won 18 tournaments. He was the first guy to have a scoring average under 68. So I got to meet and talk with Byron, and then I got to meet him again a few years later in the White House. But I've had a wonderful time. I've met all these guys, Sarazen, Snead. It's been wonderful. And I got to work in politics when it was civilized and sane, where the people didn't demonize each other. Even when we fought like hell, we didn't demonize each other. You talked about Richard Nixon, who died 30 years ago, and he was a very nerdy guy. He was awkward. He was an introvert. He didn't do well at schmoozing. He was, always self-conscious about being poor. He started his book, I Was Born in a House My Father Built. They had gotten a catalog from Sears, and his dad built the house, and there were lots of errors in it. They had an upstairs thing for the 4 boys, and the boys, they made it too small. The boys couldn't stand up. None of the boys could stand up in the big upstairs room they had. Nixon always was conscious of being socially inferior. And when he got to the Senate, he became great friends with Jack Kennedy, who actually donated money to Nixon's campaigns. He felt it all. One guy is handsome, rich, the life of the party, and here's Nixon, who was like a geek and who was like awkward and who has a 5 o'clock shadow and who sweats around his nose and mouth. But he was brilliant. He was a brilliant man. And I was in that White House. We never had a majority in the House. We never had a majority in the Senate. We worked closely with Democrats. We created the Environmental Protection Agency. We created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We created the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Philadelphia Plan that was trying to force the labor unions to hire blacks. We talk about racist things in the United States, but really the unions tried to keep blacks out for a long time, and it was Nixon who did it. When I went into the Nixon White House, they gave me some papers that Nixon had privately written on, and you should have seen them. The first thing I saw was historically black colleges and university, and it had all Nixon's handwritten marginalia on these papers, and it was, we have to get more money privately or publicly to these black colleges. The Ivies and the others and the state schools get too much money compared to what we're getting to these black places and schools that will take care of blue collar people, which Nixon was. So Nixon gets a bad rap because of Watergate, but he did a lot of good things. Not to say about how he stopped the world from going into nuclear war. The height of the Cold War, he was the one that did détente with Russia. Of course, going to China, everybody knows that. But Richard Nixon, the good is often interred with their bones. And so it is with Dick Nixon.
I think one of the worst things Richard Nixon did was let the White House putting green grow over. It was originally built by Dwight Eisenhower in the 50s, and Nixon wasn't a golfer, but Jerry Ford, your next boss, was. How was Jerry?
Well, Nixon was a terrible golfer. He was uncoordinated. He was not really a good athlete, but he always wanted to impress General Eisenhower, who loved golf and who played, until Obama, played more golf than any other president. Jerry Ford loved golf. Jerry Ford was a very good athlete. He was portrayed by a man named Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live as a bumbling, clumsy oaf. Why? Because he had a bad knee. He was the captain of the University of Michigan football team, the captain. He was the center, an unglamorous job, but an important job for a lot of reasons. You all know them. And in that job, he got beat up. He got beat up badly. His knees got beat up. And so going downstairs, sometimes he would stumble. And so they would say he was clumsy. He would blah, blah. He wasn't clumsy. He was an athlete. He was a football player. And as a golfer, he was about a 12, Rob and Matt and Cory, about a 12 handicapper. He had a poor short game. But in those days, with wooden-headed clubs, he could hit his tee shots about 270, which was as long as any of the pros would hit him. The pros never averaged. No pro ever averaged more than 270 yards a drive until 1970. That's how much the clubs are now, and the equipment, and of course the players are better. They're ripped. They are, they go to the gym. They're gym rats. They're stronger than the old guys that I used to know and hang around with. But Jerry Ford, he loved golf. He hit a long ball. Sometimes it was wild. Bob Hope, the comedian, said, with Ford, we would tee off and then figure out what course we were playing.
I got a question about time working in the Ford. I'm always interested when you meet people before they become what they become. And obviously you worked under Dick Cheney in the Ford White House. I mean, did anybody ever have it on their bingo card that Dick Cheney would become vice president of the United States and play such a prominent role?
Not then. Dick was a very, very bright man with a nice sense of humor. I think that Dick's heart troubles restricted his personality later. He became much more somber and darker later after he had his heart troubles. No, but he was brilliant. Dick Cheney was a brilliant young man and always has been a brilliant young guy. Jerry Ford was the most unassuming man you've ever seen. He graduated in the upper third of his Yale Law School class, so that tells you he wasn't a dumb klutz like people portray him as. But he was laid back, and he never tried to press himself into things. He would let all of us carry the conversation or be the stars. He would defer to his guests. A wonderful man. I remember when he became vice president, in a really, somebody should look at the way he became vice president. That was a brilliant setup. But anyway, he said that even when he was vice president, he said, if I ever do move up, we're going to have to repair all the damage that we've had by Vietnam and by Watergate. He said the top thing that I have to do if I ever get to the top job was to bind up all these dreadful wounds. I can't tell you, the only thing that I've seen in my lifetime was the bitterness over Vietnam and then the bitterness over Watergate. They were times that rival our own. Our own time is a time of lots of bitterness, talk show radio, cable news, dreadful things that have wrecked, and the fact that the candidates now are not controlled by their parties. They are independent performance art people who the most extreme raise the most money. The Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world. I mean, it sickens me when I read in the paper, the Washington Post, and I guess they make money off of it, how they keep talking about her and what her views are. She's an idiot. And unfortunately, the more idiotic they are, the more money they make, and they're uncontrollable. In a parliamentary system, the Labor Party and the Tories control their candidates. They control their financing. In that system, they know they don't let somebody who's a stranger like Trump become their candidate. They don't. They have a kind of a closed system, but it keeps crazy people from becoming the party leaders.
Well,
And no control anymore over. I'm mixing golf with politics here.
Well, I want to hang on that subject.
Keep me from rambling.
No, I want to keep you on the subject because it's one of the reasons for our podcast. I mean, Rob and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum politically, but I think that we're both sane enough to not let our ideological differences get in the way of friendship and get in the way of our love for the country. Unfortunately, that's not the case with a lot of people. I mean, I know friends that are no longer friends because of political differences. But what was the biggest fundamental shift that you saw in campaigns since you first started working in politics? Like, where did things really start to change where it's so polarized? And you talked about performance arts, which is a lot of it. Who can be the most bombastic in primaries often
That's
wins.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
When do you feel like that changed?
I think that things started slightly changing in the 80s. Mostly they started changing because of people on the right-wing side of the spectrum. When you got talk show radio hosts like Rush Limbaugh and people like him, and once he began making his millions, we had wannabes. We had dozens and dozens of Rush Limbaugh wannabes, and they were demonizing the enemy and feminazis and all this stuff. I hated it. When I saw the cable news, the Fox and these, I said, "This is dreadful. This is going to tear the fabric of our country down." Ronald Reagan told us in the first week that he was in the White House, Tip O'Neill is not our enemy. The Democrats are not our enemies. I was a Democrat until I was about 40 years old. Wow. He said, they don't dislike America. They don't hate America. He said, these people are political adversaries, but they're our friends. And we're not going to demonize them when I'm president. I was one of them. And most of my friends in Hollywood were Democrats.
Do you remember, was it the Bloody Eighth in Indiana? Was that kind of a tipping point? A lot of people point to that as a tipping point in where things really went partisan.
Well, there were all kinds of things like that. There were the recounts in that New Hampshire Senate race where the Democrats, the Republicans cheated the Democrats out of a Supreme Court seat. But the Democrats cheated the Republicans out of a Senate seat by not recognizing the winner and then having a redo. And that's what started. And then the thing that really burns me is not something that people see, but It's the confirmation process. The confirmation process, back when I was raised by people who worked for Dwight Eisenhower, Bryce Harlow and Brad Patterson and others. And they told me that secretaries of the departments, the names would be submitted to the Senate. They would do a cursory check to make sure they weren't crooks or anything. And within 2 weeks to a month, they were all confirmed. Now, every appointee, it could be the assistant secretary, deputy, or assistant secretary for nutrition at HHS, and the Republicans will filibuster it. You know, we had the EPA air administrator, Joe Goffman. He just got confirmed. He was nominated. He was nominated by Biden in 2021. He just got confirmed. No, and they demand all this stuff. Both sides do it, and I've been trying to urge my friends on both sides. We need to unilaterally disarm or mutually disarm. We have to let the president get his people. We can't brutalize them. We can't bork everybody. And watching that process, that's another one. All these processes go to the same thing: shredding comedy, where we used to have, Ronald Reagan would have dinners at least twice every month with Tip O'Neill. And probably 1 out of 3 of these things, every third one, was Tip and Millie and Ronnie and Nancy. And that's what happened. When do you think the last time was that we had anything like this? I mean,
I heard you
it's horrific.
I heard you in another interview say that when you working in the Reagan administration, you needed 28 Democrat votes to get anything done in the House.
That's right. We never had more than 191. We had 191 a few times.
I mean, we don't see that today, hardly ever. I mean, what do you think has to happen for us to get back to that, where we bring common sense together and have Republicans and Democrats working together for the good of the country?
I'm very pessimistic about it. Once you get to this level and it's all going in one direction and it's all bad.
We went from an era in the early 90s where Dan Quayle misspelled the word potato. And the country basically decided, you don't get to be president for misspelling potato. And today we've got a guy in court facing 35 felony counts. He's already been held liable on a bunch of other, civil cases. He's got 91 counts, criminal counts overall. How do we go from an era where a guy gets tossed out from political relevance for misspelling potato to Trumpism?
You're way above my pay grade, Rob. I in my own little world, I do what I can do. We promote bipartisanship in my lobbying firm. We meet with Debbie Dingle, who's really a good woman. We meet with, your friend Martin Heinrich. We meet with all these people to try to have sane conversations. We meet a lot with OSHA and EPA. And in my own little area, I do what I can do. And, I was around in the 1990s when Newt and the Republicans and the Tea Party people demonized the Democrats. And unfortunately, it was successful. And that was like phase 2 of the this demonization period. The first one were the Limbaughs, and they were sort of comic and with a nasty streak. Then it got to be a nasty streak with no comedy. And now it's just gone on like this. And to be honest, most of it's on my side. What used to be my side. I'm not sure what side I'm on now.
Well, on the Supreme Court confirmation process, I think everybody agrees that it's out of control. And an embarrassment to the process. I agree on to the victors go the spoils to some extent, barring putting a criminal in a seat. But when you look at recent court arguments and the votes, I used to buy into the David Souter, Justice Breyer, Justice Kennedy argument that it's not conservative or liberal as in politics the way we think of it. It's just simply the way we interpret the Constitution. Well, I used to buy into that. But now, when you look at the money that's being invested on both sides to put somebody through or block them, and then you look at the votes that consistently are 6-3, 6-3, 6-3, maybe a 5-4 thrown in there. Is it not fair to say that both sides are justified to try to politicize and keep certain people off the court if they know that they're going to have a guaranteed opponent on the bench for 40 years?
That I regard most of that as starting with the Democrats assassinating Robert Bork. I worked with Bob Bork. He was an odd duck, but a brilliant man and a brilliant jurist. And when he came up for his nomination, he laid out everything he believed. He didn't hide it. He didn't hide behind platitudes. And Ted Kennedy just absolutely eviscerated him. And that started it. Now they lie about themselves. They refuse to talk. They won't, speculate on these things. And so it's like they have to lie. And get to something that's enjoyable here.
Oh, I'll change the subject. I want to keep it on your work in politics, but I'm going to shift to something more inspirational, I guess. I saw an interview where you talked about every day that you showed up at the White House, you were inspired to work for Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely.
The man is the greatest communicator probably of our lifetimes.
And he communicated great ideas.
Tell me.
He was a great communicator, but he also had great ideas. And he was the most fun guy, the most enjoyable person to work with. His disposition was, well, you all know about when he was shot. And he told Nancy when she showed up, honey, I forgot to duck. When he was getting ready to go under anesthesia, because now they knew the bullet was in the region of his heart. And he told the head surgeon, I hope you guys are all Republicans. When Reagan played 1.5 rounds of golf a year, and he never let him go on public, but one year at New Year, and he played on New Year's Day every year, 8 times. And he tried to play at Augusta. That's when they had the terrorists there, and he got and held hostages in the pro shop. Anyway, let me get to Reagan. Reagan is teeing off in front of cameras. He's letting cameras film him. And he only plays once a year with no practice. So he teed off on number 1, and he hits it about 150 yards. He sort of half tops it, but he hits it. So it's, not very good, but it went about 150. And he turns to the cameras and he goes, you guys are responsible. I'm camera shy. but that's how he was when we were working for Reagan. The first week we worked there, he told us, well, you boys should get plenty of rest. I don't like tired staff people. Unlike Korda, we're not here to work 10 hours a day. So some of us decided we were going to work 10 hours a day. Guys who were veterans of Nixon and Ford. So we started meeting at 7:30 p.m. Those days we didn't have the internet, 1981. And we didn't even have voicemail, okay? So you had to answer 80 or 90 telephone calls a day. And we had we had like long metal spikes, and you would get phone messages on pink paper, and you would stick them on your spike. And at the end of the day, you'd collect them, and you'd find out who you have to return the calls. Well, we decided that we would begin working once Reagan left. Reagan told us what he was going to do. He would leave 5 o'clock every day, go back to the family quarters, have a drink with Nancy. He loved Nancy. They used to have a lunch on Wednesdays in the Rose Garden when the weather was nice, or in the little dining room off the Oval. And they used to touch each other. I mean, they touched each other they loved each other. I mean,
Yeah.
they not only loved each other, they physically loved each other, and they would touch each other. It was remarkable. But Reagan would say, I go back and see Nancy, have a drink, relax, watch some television, then have dinner, he said, and he told us he didn't want us to work these long hours. Well, we decided to defy him. So once we knew he was gone, we started going across the hall from the Oval into the Roosevelt room at 7:30. And we would stay there till 10 o'clock. One night, early in his tenure, Reagan came back from the family quarters to the Oval Office to get something. It's a pretty walk. And, you go through the Jefferson Arch and you go by the Rose Garden. It's a nice walk. It's a short walk, but it's a pretty nice walk. Anyway, we're in our little room in the Roosevelt room, all men those days, by the way, no women. And we're having our meeting, and it's like 8:30, 8:45. And Reagan went into the Oval Office, and he said, well, officer, is everything okay? And the officer said, yes. He said, it's quiet except for your staff that's across the hall working. He said, oh, do you know what it's about? And the guard said, Secret Service guard, uniform division guy said, oh, they do it every night. Reagan said, they do it every night? He went, yes, sir, they do it every night, every night. They come here at 7:30, 8 o'clock. So we're in the middle of the meeting. The door opens, and it's Reagan. And he ducks in. We go, Mr. President. And he looks at his watch. He goes, well, it's kind of late. What are all you guys doing here? Don't you have girlfriends or wives? And we stammer out some excuses about why we're there so late. And Reagan looks and he says, well, there's an old saying, hard work never killed anybody. But I say, why take the chance? and then he walks out. He walks out, and we look at each other, and the door opens, and he's back. He said, oh, and another thing. I was governor of California. He said, when I was governor, I found out that those cabinet men who burned the midnight oil every night, they were the bad managers. That's how he was. How could you not love him? He would be, and he always had a story that was a little bit of a dig at the audience that he had, but it was a sweet dig. Like when he had the Council of Bishops, he did a wonderful speech, and they loved him, and they ate it up. And then at the very end, he said, well, that makes me think of that story about the atheist. He said the atheist and his wife were walking along the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And suddenly he slipped and he fell. And he caught onto a branch. And he'd been an atheist, or was an atheist. And he suddenly began praying. He said, oh, God, if you're up there, if there is a God in heaven, if you exist, oh, God, please look at me and see the situation I am in. Can you tell me something? Said a voice came down and said, I am the Lord. And he said, you do exist. Said, I exist. He said, well, what do I do now, Lord? And he goes, if you have faith and you want to show your faith, let go of the branch. And the atheist, wait a minute. Is there anybody else up there? and he did the funniest things. Reagan, we had when he was running for re-election in '84, we had to combine the ethnic groups. There were so many Italians for Reagan, Poles for Reagan, Hungarians for Reagan. We had all these groups, Irish for Reagan. And we had these ethnic groups. We had Reagan, as you know, won a big, big victory in 1984. He wrecked Mondale. He carried every state except for Minnesota, and we lost that by 10,000. Ed Rollins hadn't told us not to spend money there, we'd have carried that, but Ed screwed that up. Anyway, we had two ethnic groups in a rally, Poles and Italians. And the thing was beautiful, and it was done. And my job was to say, "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you." That was my entire role. "Thank you, Mr. President." I had a lot of roles like this where I have these kind of parts. And so the thing was beautiful. The Poles, the Italians, they loved it. "Thank you, Mr. President." But instead of going, he said, "Well, you know, I have a story that maybe I shouldn't tell the story." I was going, "Uh-oh, Jesus Christ, here we are." So he said, "Well, you know, when I was a young man in Dixon, Illinois, we had a sport that's not very popular today. It's cockfighting. It's very cruel," he said. "The roosters would wear metal on their talons and they would tear each other to shreds. It's a pretty ugly sport, but that's what we did when we were out in the country." He said, "Now, how do you know," and these are Poles and Italians, he said, "how do you know that the Poles went to this cockfight?" And the answer, "They're the ones who brought a duck."
Oh,
He
jeez.
said, "How do you know that the Italians were there too? The duck won." How do you not love a guy like that?
Yeah.
Well, Wayne, I don't think these guys know it either. But when I was working for Congressman Bob Latta, we introduced a bill commemorating Ronald Reagan. We tried to issue a commemorative coin. Coin Act to honor President Reagan, and we were going to take the proceeds. And I think it was the U.S. Army Fund or one of those Army organizations that Reagan did a movie for back in like the 40s or the 50s.
Yeah, he did several. He did Hellcats of the Navy, and he did a whole lot of things. He was partly deaf in one ear, by the way, because during that movie they fired a gun right next to his ear, and it broke his eardrum and made him very hard of hearing. So what happened with
Lack of at that, I believe for a commemorative coin, you have to have 2/3 of majority, just like a suspension bill. And needless to say, it wasn't getting enough co-sponsors, if you will.
You know, I told you about how Reagan had they fired a gun and they burst his eardrum, and so it left him hard of hearing, and he had a lot of trouble. He had to cup his hand to his ear and do things. And Nancy said, "Get a hearing aid, Ronnie, get a hearing aid." So he finally got a hearing aid, and he told us he had his staff, and he said, "Gentlemen, I brought you in here today because I have a hearing aid." He said, "And I'm going to go and do a press conference." He said, I have to do this. I want to get it out of the way. I'm only going to discuss this once. I don't want to have this hearing aid, but I'm going to do it." So he goes into the press room and he announces he has a hearing aid, and he explains about the hearing aid, and he talks about the Hellcats of the Navy, and he talks about everything. And he said, "Now, are there any questions?" And a big, loudmouthed ABC TV guy named Sam Donaldson says, "Mr. President, what kind of hearing it? What kind is it?" And Reagan went, "Oh, it's about 3:00.
Can I ask?
He was the best. And but look what he did.
Yeah.
Tear down this wall, and then he worked very hard to build confidence with the Russians. And communism fell. It fell under Bush, but it fell without a shot being fired. You never would have thought that would happen. All the blood and all the terrible things that happened during the communist 80 years in power, and it was amazing. And Reagan told us that would happen.
When Reagan when Reagan passed away, the House Administration Committee, of which our former boss was the chairman, had to pass a resolution to reserve the rotunda for President Reagan's body to lay in state. And John Larson, who was the Democratic ranking member of the committee, was flying back from overseas and was going to miss his speech. So they had to give his speech to the next Democrat in line. And I was asked to quickly, get the draft for Larson to Congresswoman Juanita Melender McDonald from LA. And so I emailed the speech that was drafted for Larson to her chief of staff and said, look, I wrote this for Larson. You got to edit it. Whatever you do, don't send her down there with this speech. You got to change it around a little bit. Well, of course, she shows up on C-SPAN and takes the speech I had written. And she's a black woman from Los Angeles. And she starts out by saying, as a young Irish Catholic boy from Connecticut.
I hope that didn't happen.
And it did. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I am so fired. I am so fired for this. And then she continues to reference his role as Knute Rockne. And I'm just sitting there like, I have done it. I have really done it this time. Sorry, that was my closest Ronald Reagan story.
I want to move on to golf, but I have to ask one more question about your time in the Reagan administration, then we'll move on to golf. But Cory and I both worked for Congressman Bob Latta. I was his campaign manager in a special election in 2007. Cory was a volunteer on the campaign. Actually, the first staffer I think that Latta hired was Cory as a legislative aide, which led to his whole career now. Del Latta was obviously a huge part of our story running the campaign in 2007, because in 1988, Del retired from Congress. Bob ran for his seat, lost by 27 votes, and was ready to run whenever it happened. And Congressman Gilmore dies, special election, Bob runs. We had an ad talking about Del Latta passing the Graham-Latta tax cuts. We had pictures of Bob, Latta, and Reagan. It was all about being a Reagan Republican, which has kind of gone out the window. Now it's all about who's the Trumpiest to win Republican primaries. It's changed. But I do want to hear just a quick story about Del Latta getting the tax cuts passed. It was a major legislative accomplishment.
It was a very smart, very down to business, let's get down to the brass tacks guy that didn't spend a lot of time on pleasantries. It was let's get down to it. And I had to meet with Mr. Latta, and I came back and I told everybody he's a very tough guy, but he's our tough guy.
That's great.
Clean that up slightly.
Well, it's
hard. First class. He was a first class guy.
And really I tell you, Congressman Bob Latta is first class today too.
He reached across party lines, and he worked with Graham when Graham was a Democrat. And I mean, he did a great job. Del did a great job getting coalition industries, large industries, on board for those tax cuts. Reagan had been in Hollywood in World War II when the top tax rate was 70%. And they had a surtax during the war where they ended up basically taking about 85% of your income.
Wow.
If you were in the high brackets, and you couldn't hide your money like an industrialist. You were just a working stiff that had a lot of money. That's why Reagan wanted to cut taxes, because he remembered what happened to him during.
Can we venture back before we dip into golf here? Well, this is kind of golf related. Can we venture back? You were talking about comedy earlier, and I was watching a skit earlier with Don Rickles and Frank Sinatra, but I believe that those guys were all close with Gerald Ford, I think, and Bob Hope and all the Bob Hope classic.
Yes, Bob Hope was very, very close to Jerry Ford. They really liked each other. They lived out near each other in Palm Springs, and they played.
Did you have a chance to meet, or any of those guys came to the White House at all? Any interactions with them? Or?
Many times. I got to meet Bob Hope. He was one of a kind. He was like full of gags and lines. Every other sentence was a comedy, comedy gag, and he kept Ford in stitches. I'll tell you another guy who went from being a Democrat to being a Republican was Frank Sinatra. Frank had been a Democrat, was active with the Kennedys. And then because of the story of Frank's alleged mob connections, especially with a woman named Judith Campbell Exner, who became quite close to President Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy had Frank stricken from the White House and other things And Frank went away, and he was kind of in the wilderness. And then Nancy Reagan went to him, and I had the pleasure on 1982. We were going to have the president of Italy, whose name escapes me, but he was the president of Italy, and it was 1982, the year after Reagan was shot. And all the senior staff got an announcement, come to the East Room immediately. And I and most of my friends were afraid something untoward had happened to the president. And we got there into the East Room, and they had a piano and a little band. And we went, well, this is odd. This is very odd. Emergency, come over to the East Room, and they've got a little orchestra set up. And we came in, and Nancy and Ron came out. I went, well, he looks okay. And Nancy said, well, you know, we're having Sandro Pertini. How about that for an old man? Remembering the president of Italy in 1982. That's not bad. So Nancy said, we're having President Petrini, however you spell it, tomorrow, and we're having talent. We have 2 young new singers, and we're here to give them a rehearsal, and you all are going to stay for the next hour and a half. She said, boys, come on out. And Frank Sinatra and Perry Como came out. And Frank came out, and he grabbed Nancy, and he said, honey, you get rid of this old man here, and we're going to have it all the time for the next
That's
hour.
Great.
It was that was one of the best hour and a halves I've ever had in my life.
Amazing.
Watching Frank and Perry Como rehearse and just doing their stuff off camera. It was wonderful.
And Wayne, I don't think people that I was an intern at the White House for George W. Bush when he first got elected. 2002, January through May, and I worked in political affairs with Ken Melman and Matt Schlapp. And I mean, fascinating. I mean, it opened my world to what's out there. And people don't realize, like, people that would just stop into the White House. I'm sitting there at my desk looking at campaign contributions of political appointees, and behind me is Lynn Swan. You know, one day I'm there, and there's Mel Gibson, there's Bruce Willis. Got pictures with all these guys and autograph. It was just the most fascinating thing for a 20-year-old kid from Weirton, West Virginia. It's like, what a country that I get to do this. And I remember some of the times I'm making coffee and filing. Some days I'm writing a memo that the president might see. Like, it's a great country.
Yeah, it is a great country. As I said in that other show, I was inspired every day, and I'm still a tourist. You know what I did when I was in the Reagan White House? At that time, I was a special assistant, and that is when you become the honorable, and you get a pass that allows you to do many things, way more things back then than there are now. Now there's all these limits. But I would go for lunch into Lafayette Park, and I would take a sandwich out to have lunch there. And then I would walk over to the gate, the north gate of the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, in the days when there were cars driving by, before the Oklahoma bombing. And I would see people looking through the gates, average Joes. And I especially liked it if they were minorities. And I would say, they would have families. I'd say, sir, are you here as a tourist? And have you had your tour of the White House? And they would usually say no. I'd say, would you like to go in? I could give you a tour of the West Wing. I said, do you pay taxes? They'd say yes. I'd say, well, you're a partial owner.
That's great.
And I would take them in through the West Wing, and the Secret Service, who I later represented for their pay raises, gratis. I worked for the Secret Service to try to get them a more than a 5% pay raise. I said, what can you guys pay me? They said, we can pay you nothing, but we can take you for some free lunches in the strip clubs. So that's how I pay. But you can edit that, I guess.
Yeah, that's too good. That's great.
Anyway, I used to bring people through the White House, and it was wonderful because just like Rob knows, I give tours of St. Andrews to people. I probably get 2 or 3 emails or messages a month now from people that I gave the St. Andrews tours to. Well, it's the same with the White House. I used to do the White House tours. And may I use that line. I hadn't planned it, but use that line to transition to the golf.
Yes, let's do it.
So on May the 8th, 1992, in the late morning, but who's counting, I'm at my office, my lobbying office, big lobbying office, 1701 Pennsylvania Avenue. I have the penthouse floor, the balcony overlooking the White House for 400 people. The guy that invented America Online has the other half. We shared that balcony. I was a big dog in those days. Big dog in my youth. That was my salad days. And I'm on with Exxon, and it's the middle of the 92 campaign. It's May. The campaign is on. Clinton is getting ready to get the nomination. George Bush, we've got Ross Perot going to run, and he's in trouble. Herbert Walker's in trouble. But it's May the 8th, and I'm in my office with the top of the Exxon line, and the phone rings, and my executive assistant runs in and said, "It's President Bush," Herbert Walker. President Bush on the phone himself. He wants to speak to you, and all my clients poo-pooed me. "Oh, yeah, right. Who is it, your brother? Who is calling? Rob Ellsworth? Who's calling you?" Said, "Is it really the president?" And Karen said, "Yeah." So I pick up the phone. I said, "Mr. President?" "Yes, Wayne. Do you have a minute?" I went, "Yes, sir. I have a minute." He said, "Well, I need you." I said, "But first, you have to tell these folks from Exxon that it's really you." He said, "Put me on the speaker." "You got a speaker on?" "Yeah, we have a speaker." I put him on the speaker, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, I hear it. Ken Cohen, are you there?" He said, blah, blah. And he said, "You SOBs, when I was in Midland, you always caused me a lot of trouble. You're trying to squeeze me out of existence. You're trying to crush me out with that big company, Exxon.
Yeah.
Now you kiss my ass." He said, "So I like it better this way." He said, "Now I'm going to talk to Wayne." I said, "Okay." And so he said, "I need you over here. Can you get over here in about 3 minutes?" I went, "If you clear me over, I can. Do I have to stay with you guys?" They went, "No." Go ahead. I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I got some people you've heard of. I know you love golf, Wayne. We've played golf, and I know you know these men." I said, "Go ahead, Mr. President." He said, "Sam Snead." I said, "I love Sam Snead." He said, "Gene Sarazen." I said, my idol, Gene Sarazen. I love him." He said, "Byron Nelson." I went, "Byron Nelson? Oh, my God. The greatest year in the history of golf, 1945. He said, "Yep." "Robert Trent Jones." I said, "Oh, Robert Trent Jones, I've just visited a club that he designed, and I'm probably going to join it." I said, "Why are you telling me this, Mr. President? I'm envious enough of you that you've got all these great men. They're over there now." He said, "Yeah, they're in the West Lobby." I said, "Well, what so?" He said, "So they think they're going to meet with me in 10 minutes for a 4-person birthday party. Byron and Sam are turning 80. Sarazen is turning 90, and Trent Jones is 86. I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm going to be delayed for an hour and a quarter. We can't have them cooling their heels." He said, "I need somebody that gives great White House tours." I said, "Well, I give great White House tours. I gave some to your to Doro's family." He went, "Yep, you did. That's his daughter." I said, "I did. They were good." He said, "And the other thing I remember is when we played golf, you were insufferable. All you did was talk about ancient history. Who, what, how many games in a row, Walter Hagen won in the PGA tours in the 1920s, and when Sam beat Hogan, and when Nelson." You gave all these things, so you must know a lot about the careers of all these men. I said, "Nobody knows more than I do about these careers. Nobody. Nobody at the Golf Hall of Fame can match me for knowledge in depth." He said, "That's what I thought." He said, "But most importantly, we got an hour and a quarter to kill. I need a fabulous bullshit artist." So I got to go over and spend an hour and a half with these 4 guys. And Byron couldn't walk very well, and neither could Robert Trent Jones. So we gave him just a very short West Wing tour, and it was fabulous.
Wow.
It was great. I as I walked over in the 3 minutes, and I did get over there in probably 5 minutes. I said, I should probably be nice, but I should stir the pot a little bit. If that's who I am. I'm kind of a provocateur, right, Rob? I like to provoke things. So I walked over there. And I said, first thing to Sarazen, I said, Mr. Sarazen, I love you. I said, I've heard many different stories about your double eagle. The shot heard around the world. By the way, I just saw on TV the 10 best master shots in history. Well, yeah, they were, but of the last 45 years. There was one that they left out. A one where Craig Wood was leading the Masters by 3, and he was already finished, and they were telling him, well, Craig, they didn't have the green jacket in those days. They didn't do the green jacket till 1949 when Sam won. Snead won. So they didn't have a green jacket back then in 35, but Craig Wood had won the tournament. He was 3 ahead. There was nobody that could really catch him. Sarazen was on 15. He was 3 back. And Sarazen hit what was a big drive in those days, about 260 on 15. And he had an African-American caddy, a local guy who they called Stovepipe. And he said, well, Stovepipe, if I really get into a 4-wood or a 3-wood, I can carry Rays Creek. And he said, yes, sir, Mr. Sarazen. It's the only option. You got to hit it. And so Sarazen hit it, and he made it 2. Made a double eagle. In those days, they didn't have scoreboards. They had very young black men who were runners. And the runners would come into the clubhouse. And the runner came into the clubhouse and said, Mr. Sarazen just made a 2 on number 15. And they said to the young man, oh, you must be mistaken, son. You mean that he made a 2 on number 16, the par 3. And he said, no, sir. Mr. Sarazen just made a 2 on 15.
Wow.
And they went, Mr. Sarazen telling me this story. And he said, so they ran back, and apparently Gene wasn't there. They said, Craig, we got to hold off on your award and stuff. We better learn whether Mr. Sarazen really did make a 2 on number 15. And Sarazen said, he talked like that. Yeah, he said, everybody had quit on me. There weren't 10 people in the gallery when I hit that shot. They were all at the clubhouse surrounding Craig Wood. He said, now, for the last 50 years, he said, wherever I go, people say, I was there when you hit it. I was there when I saw your shot on number 15 when you made your double eagle. Wow. He said, there weren't 10 people out there. He said, Byron came out to watch me because he's my friend. And I made it. He said, but nobody. He said, but they went in. And so, but he told me that story. And then I said, my second thing I did was to provoke. I said, Sam, how did you make that 7 on the 72nd hole of the 1939 Open to lose to Byron? And Byron jumped in and said, well, you have to be lucky to ever beat Sam. You have to get some luck. He said, they didn't have scoreboards in those days. And Sam asked for information. They told him he needed a 4 on the last hole. And he hit his drive into some fresh turf, and it wedged in between 2 pieces of turf. His tee shot did, about 270. And he only had about 230 yards left of the green, but he thought he needed a birdie. So he took a fairway wood, and the ball only went 20 yards. It was in the turf. They wouldn't give him relief. And then he got so angry, he hit it into a bunker. And then he was just steaming mad. He ended up making a 7. And Sam started, he listened to Byron, who told the story, and then, damn it, he said, everybody's always asking me about the tournaments that I didn't win. He said, they cheated me. He said, the PGA said I won 82. He said, son, how old are you? I said, well, I'm in my 40s. He said, back when I played, he said, the PGA didn't run most of the tournaments. He said, private clubs ran them tournaments. He said, I would play in a tournament, and like the Greenbrier would have a tournament, and there would be Byron, and there was Ben, and he said I'd win that tournament, and the PGA wouldn't count him. They
Wow.
said I only won 82. You look it up. Well, I looked it up. He won 47 tournaments that they didn't count because they
Wow.
weren't PGA sanctioned. He won 129. But anyway, he told me about and then he calmed down. Well, he said, I don't want to get. He said, this is a fun event here. I don't want to get too angry. He said, a lot of nice looking young gals around here. That was my hour and a quarter with those guys, and Sarazen was wonderful. After he told me the story about 1935, he said, "Young man," he said, "you shouldn't be living in the past. I hate to see young people living in the past." I said, "Well, I watched your tape between you and Sir Henry Cotton in that famous match on the old course." "Oh, that's terrible." He said, "the camera work is awful. It's black and white. Why?" He said, "I'm 90. I'm looking ahead. I'm thinking about what can I do next." He said, "My advice to you is do the same thing."
Fantastic.
No, I've been to Augusta many times, but never played it. I have never played it. I thought I was going to get to play it. There was a friend named Kenneth Cohen at Exxon who was in charge of their sports programs and everything. And if you remember, Exxon had been a sponsor of the Masters for many years. Exxon, Rolex, they only had the best sponsors. And then a bunch of women, feminists, I shouldn't say a bunch of women, a group of feminists demanded that a woman become a member of the club. And Hootie Johnson, the then chairman of Augusta, said, "We will integrate this club sexually in due time, but we will not integrate at the point of a bayonet." And he said, "In order to not subject our wonderful sponsors to your boycott and your pressures, we are going to cancel all our sponsors for the next few years and not have any sponsors. We will fund it ourselves. We'll self-fund the Masters broadcasts." And he did that. Fast forward 3 years. 3 years go by. The pressure goes down. Ken Coleman in his office. He told me this story. Hootie Johnson calls him. "Ken, would Exxon like to become a sponsor again?" "Oh, yeah, Mr. Johnson. We've just been waiting for this moment when we can rejoin you as a sponsor." He said, "Well, you can." And he said, "I would like you personally to come down to negotiate with me at the club and play around with me. Have you played here before?" Ken went, "No." He said, "Well, I'd like you to come down here. It will be you and me and one other guy will play." And Ken said, "Who's the other guy?" And he said, "Phil Mickelson. The three of us will play. And then we'll go into the clubhouse and we'll negotiate the contract." And Ken said, "Give me the time." And he did it. Then he immediately called the CEO, Dave Raymond. And he said, "Dave, I got this phone call from Hootie Johnson. He wants me to come down to negotiate our new contract after we play around together with Phil Mickelson." And Dave went, "What? You're going down to play with Phil Mickelson? You're going down? He's having you go down representing the company?" And Ken said, "Yes." And Dave went, "I'll be damned." And Ken said, "Boss, is there any part of the Exxon Corporation that you don't want me to give away?"
Wow.
All right, I'm really rambling all over.
No,
the
those were some good years of watching the Masters though when they had no sponsors. It was like nope,
Yes.
It was commercial free. It was
No
fantastic.
commercials. You got exactly, yeah.
I want to know the Wayne Valis top 5, your favorite golf experiences as far as courses, the just the overall day. If you had to pick 5.
Playing golf with George H.W. Bush at the Phoenician
Yeah.
in Arizona. That's my top golf playing thing. And on, I think it was like the 13th or 14th hole. I was never as good a player as Rob is, and I don't know how good Matt and Cory are, but Rob was really good. He was better than scratch. But my best, I was a 6, my best, and I usually played at about a 7, 8, or 9, something like that. But on this long hole, I hit about a 255-yard drive, which is nothing for you guys, but it was big for me. And then I hit a 3-wood about 240 yards, and it came up just in the frog hair. We were playing the white tees. It came up in the frog hair. And Herbert Walker said, "Wayne, those were pretty good shots. What are you going to do now? Hit a little wedge or something?" "No, Mr. President," I said, "I'm a Scottish guy. I run everything in there. I'm going to chip it in with a 5-iron. He said, "Chipping for eagle." I said, "I know. I'm good at chipping. I watched Ray Floyd. He's my idol, chipping." And I chipped the son of a bitch in for a 3. And he doesn't say anything. And we pick him up, and everybody's congratulating me, but nothing. He's absolutely silent. And as we get to the golf cart, he says, "Boy," said, "that business of yours must be in the toilet." That's all he said. Like, he had speed golf, you know. Do you know speed golf? Have we discussed this? Before every one of his shots, his full shots, Bush would whisper, "Come on, Mr. Smooth. Be with me, Mr. Smooth." That's what he would do for every shot, every full shot. If you played real speed golf, where you finished the round in about 2 hours, you'd tee off, you'd watch your shot, and you'd see it, and he would say, "Okay, pick your club." You would pick your club. He would then, and he would pick his club, and he would drive you to your ball. He always drove, and he would drop you at your ball, and that club you picked was your club. You had to know whether it was 170 or 195, but whatever club you picked, that's what you hit. He dropped you off with your club, and then he went to his ball, and then you just keep hitting. You hit away, and that's how he played. And he liked it. He liked to play 36 holes, and he liked to play 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes or something for 18. So that was great. The whole day I had with those guys, Rob, inside the White House, they were, that was unbelievably for me. Most of my great times with golf are like when I would go visit. I went after I had this thing with the White House. I visited these guys. I visited Gene Sarazen, and I got invited to the awards ceremony when Gene Sarazen got the Bobby Jones Award. And the Bob Jones Award is given by the tour for people that have contributed a lifetime worth of generous things to the golf world. So you get the Bob Jones Lifetime Award, and so Sarazen gets the award, and he does a speech, and his speech is, "Well, he said, Bob and I did everything together. We were both born in 1902. We both married a woman named Mary the same year. We both were great players at the age of 20. People talk about these young phenoms." He said, "When I was 21, I had won the Open Championship and the U.S. Open. That I was a phenom." And so he said, "And Bob and I did everything together." He said, "It was a terrible thing what happened to Bob, but Bob and I love each other." He said, "I'm ready to see Bob now." He was over 90. He was 90 when this happened. He said, "I see them up in the sky right there." He said, "There they are. They're on the first hole. They're waiting for me. Walter Hagen is there. Tommy Armour, my old friend, the Silver Scott. He's there. He's there for me, and Bob's there for me." And then Sarazen looks up at the sky and he goes, "Boys, I'm coming, but not yet. Not yet." That was his acceptance speech. No, I love these guys. You don't know how much I have loved all this stuff, Rob.
When you think back to the era when they played and
Well,
the equipment that they played with, um, what are your thoughts on the proposals to roll back the golf ball?
well, it's tough to go backwards, but none of the courses can take 340 yard, 350 yard, 370-yard drives. You know, Augusta, they tiger proofed the course by buying a lot of land from the adjacent club. What's that other club?
Augusta Country Club.
And they bought the land and they extended the tees, and then they've done stuff like on, is it 15 or 13, where they've moved the tee box so they make it harder to hit it, straight and then get easy. They fixed it this year to change the boxes, and they lengthened they lengthened them, and so you saw fewer eagles this year. I'm sure you saw a lot fewer eagles, and you saw more people hitting balls in the water than
Eagles
you
on
did.
13 on Sunday, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So what they, but most courses, and Rob has played the old course. They have gone to the full back that they can go, Rob. They can't go anywhere else. And there's some courses over there that couldn't even do that. Courses like Prestwick and some of the other courses where the Scots have built these courses like in towns and stuff, and there's just no room. So they can't take massive, back when those guys played, every once in a great while, Snead would hit a 300-yard drive. By the way, I got to play with him. He whistled. He whistled on every tee shot. I'd say, Mr. Snead, you're whistling. He said, yeah, boy. I said, the tournament is here. You got to have tempo. Tempo is the thing. He said, it's like a waltz. He said, my wife, Audrey, taught me how to do the waltz. 1, 2, 3, 4, tempo, tempo. And I said, but you could hit it longer than anybody in your generation. How did you hit it longer? He said, not by hitting harder, swinging harder, boy. I said, oily. I said, oily? He said, yeah, I always thought I was in a barrel. And when I wanted to hit it further, I'd get oily. I'd make my body oily and flexible. Then I'd give him a big full turn at about 90%, and I did okay. I said, you did okay. Yeah, you did okay. He could still play when he was an old man. When he was 64, he finished second in the PGA Championship. When he was 66, he played that round at the LA Country Club where he finished second. And when he was 67, and his blind in his right eye, and all his toes on his right foot were amputated, he went out to play at Quad Cities with the Flat Bellies. He was 67. And on the first day he shot a par at Quad Cities. You can look this up, by the way. This was in 1979. You can look it up and make sure I have the numbers right. But the second day he shot at 67. He shot his age. Then his third day he shot a par again. But on the fourth day he shot at 66. He's the only pro of a certain age, or any age, to shoot better than his age. And at the end of that's when he retired. He said, I can't walk. My body no longer lets me do this. I have to quit. But he could still play well up way into his 60s. I watched him. We had a day at the National Golf Course out in Fort Washington, Virginia, when he was 76 years old. So on that day, I didn't get to play with him, but I walked around with him. And he was cantankerous and unhappy. He wouldn't admit that he was 76. He wanted to hit his 5-iron 180. And the caddy would tell him, well, Mr. Snead, you're going to have to. And he's like, boy, you're not telling me what the hell I hit my woods in my irons. I've been playing this thing since 1935. And he'd hit, his 5-iron. He'd come up 15 yards short. And he would turn on the caddy. Damn you, boy, I said, you gave me the wrong distance. My 5-iron always carrying. He just wouldn't admit that he was He just wouldn't admit that he was 76 years old. He kept playing though. Some guys like Jack quit playing before he was 80, quit completely because he didn't want to see him. And Hogan wouldn't play because he got the yips, and he couldn't pull the club back. And he talked to Byron Nelson. He said, "Byron, I can't take the club back on short putts." And he never could get over the yips. He looked horrible. He looked like a 30 handicapper from about 4 feet. By the way, let me do a quick thing. I told this to Rob. I don't know how much time we have left, but the first real golfing president was William Howard Taft. And William Howard Taft had to defend golf in a speech that nobody remembers. He was running against the greatest orator ever to run for the presidency, William Jennings Bryan, the Cross of Gold speech. And William Jennings Bryan had twice lost the presidency. Lost to McKinley, and I can't remember. But anyway, William Jennings Bryan was losing to William Howard Taft. Taft was the fattest man ever to run for the presidency, and William Jennings Bryan was fat too. He was also fat, short and fat. And Taft loved golf. He loved golf. And so William Jennings Bryan did a speech. William Howard Taft is a plutocrat and is a slave to the plutocratic classes. Great wealth control, William Howard Taft. He is here to make the working man the slave of the plutocratic class. And the evidence is golf. Who plays golf? A silly, stupid game that's anti-working man, that is in part of the tools of the plutocracy to keep us in our places. Golf, an evil sport. And so they told Taft, ignore it. Taft wouldn't do it. He gave a speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been attacked for being a golfer. He said, you have to understand. He said, I am, more than anything, I am 295 pounds. He actually was about 330. But anyway, he said, I'm 295 pounds. I used to play baseball. I can't anymore. I used to run. I can't anymore. He said, the only sport I can play to keep myself fit, a little bit fit, is golf. I don't do this for plutocratic reasons. It's a fun sport, and it keeps me active. And that's what he did. That was his answer. That was in 1908. Jack Kennedy, Franklin Roosevelt was a very fine golfer. You know that he won medals at golf when he was at Harvard. With Harvard.
They said I've heard that he would have been the best golfing president in history if he hadn't had polio.
And he used to ask all his friends how they were doing at golf, and the other guy who was a very good golfer was Jack Kennedy.
Also with a bad back, right?
Very fine golfer with a really good smooth swing, and he loved golf, but because he had hammered Eisenhower about playing golf all the time, he hit his golf. He hit it, but he liked to play, and he liked to wager, and he was very competitive. There's a famous story. He had the head of the military aids office, who was, I think, a major general and a good golfer. And Jack Kennedy teamed up with a general in a two-man match, and they didn't play very well, and they lost the bet on the front side. And by late in the middle of the second nine, they had lost the match. The only thing that remained was the back nine match. And so they came to the last hole, and the general hit it to 4 feet, and he needed that for make that putt to win the 18th hole and to win the back. And so the general called Kennedy over, and Kennedy looked, he said, it's a straight putt, 4 feet, just knock it in. And so he walks away, and the general, I guess he got nervous or something, but he hits it 3 feet. From 4 feet, he leaves it a foot short. And they all are congratulating each other. Kennedy didn't congratulate him. Kennedy just stood off to one side. And the general came over to him to apologize. And Kenny said, "Nice putt, Sergeant."
Can I ask one more? I want to ask one more question, and then we like to end our podcast with, we call it gone playing a shotgun nine. So what? 9 quick questions, 9 quick answers. But this one, but before we get to that shotgun, I'd like to ask you about the Valis Family Learning Center at Pinecrest Golf Course, and I'd love to know also what. Yeah, and I'd also love to know your philosophy on municipal, county-run public golf courses.
Well, I came from a lower middle class family. It was very blue collar. My father didn't go to college. My mother didn't go to college. I was the first guy that went to college from my generation. And we had no money. We lived in a cinder block house. We had a coal bin to heat it. And to say it was modest is stretching it. We had no money to play golf. I learned playing golf first with wiffle balls in the backyard, and then by hitting real golf balls through our half acre of property. You'd have to try to hit a little low shot through the swing, over the swing, but above the crossbar, or you'd have to, you hit them through my mother's azalea bush and all kinds of stuff. And finally, when I got to be about, I think it was 13, I think it was about 1957, my father had enough money to take us to a public golf course, Pinecrest Golf Course in Northern Virginia. It had an 18-hole par 3 course and a 9-hole regulation size par 35 course. And he had enough money to take me there. So I went there. I had never hit a wood because we're playing in our backyard. And I never had a wood in my hands until I got to Pinecrest. It was terrible. I didn't know what to do with it. And I was terrible. I was terrible, really terrible on a real golf course. No lessons. Yeah. Terrible. So I grew up playing at Pinecrest, and I took some lessons there at Pinecrest, rudimentary lessons, and I met oodles of people. I met my then best friend, a man who, I was born in 1944. He was born in 1904. And he was about a 10 handicapper, a Greek-British guy named Mike Michaelides. Anyway, we played all the time. And he was wonderful. He told me how to hit woods, really. And I had a great time at Pinecrest with Mike. He lived to be 102. And he played golf till he was over 90. And we would just chip, and he would chip and putt, and I would hit the other shots. And it was wonderful. I met so many people. I met my best friend, Jimmy Joseph, all at Pinecrest. So now I've done better, of course. I've done pretty well. I did the revolving door, and I did it pretty damn well. For a few years, I had some pretty good years. I got paid like a pro athlete for a few years. And I did the best, by the way, Rob and boys under Bill Clinton. That's when I had my best days. But so Pinecrest had become a dump. They had bulldozed the par 3 18-hole course, and they had bulldozed the 9-hole course, and they had put in development, but we fought, and me included, we fought to keep a little small half-moon shaped buffer land on which we put an executive, which is still there, an executive golf course. But the clubhouse was a dump. Downstairs they had hitting mats where they put up pictures of Pebble Beach and all these things, but it was a dump. It had a low ceiling. There were no lights, no windows, no air, nothing. And you go down, and the ceiling was about 7 feet tall. You felt you were in a slum, and it was disgusting. And the clubhouse was terrible. But I loved it because that's where I learned to play golf when I was 13. And that's where I mostly played. And Burke Lake and other places, all public. Twin Lakes, Burke Lake, Greendale, Reston, all these places. Jefferson, all these little courses. So they told me that the club was on teetering between solvency and insolvency. And I said, what can we do? I got friends on the county government, and I can work that. And they said, well, you can, but the place is losing money. And finally, it got down to, they said, if private sector money can be gotten, the county will put money to refurbish the clubhouse. And I said, well, what about the downstairs and lessons? I would like to see a place where low income people who come to this course would have their own track man and would have like a whole area for instruction, which I never had and which you don't get at any of these public places. I said, so the bottom line was, they said, we need to raise X amount of dollars from the public. And then if you want to contribute extra money to upgrade, they'll upgrade everything. The county will upgrade everything. But I said, well, I'll be happy to lead a fundraising thing to raise the money. And I'd be happy to make a donation. They said, how long will your fundraising last? How long will it take? I said, it'll take about 2 minutes. Here's my checkbook.
Wow.
And so they created the Valis Learning Center at Pinecrest. And I go there a lot. I still play at Pinecrest 3 days a month.
That's great.
And when I go there, I always go to the Learning Center and I find somebody using the TrackMan. It's always, I think they charge $15 or $20 an hour.
Wow.
To use it. Way low, but it's always busy. It's always busy. And I go there and I said, what do you think of this place? And I said, are you a member at any private clubs? No. And is this where you do all your, yes, this is the place. I went, good. I said, well, my name is Wayne Valis. I'm on the, my family, it's called Valis Family, not me.
That's great.
But I'm pretty good with it. Robbie knows I built a lake house at RTJ, right?
I know, and you were unselfish in not calling it the Valis Lake House. I want to lead a charge to call it the Valis Palace. That was one of my favorite fundraising efforts. When the board knew you wanted to make a donation, and they knew that I was close to you, and so as it got rolling, plans for the simple halfway house started to expand, and they said, we would really appreciate it if you would make a call to Mr. Valis and see if we can't up that number. And I said, well, okay. So I gave you a call and Wayne came through.
They came to me and said, Wayne, to show you how influential I really am and how persuasive I really am, I began complaining about the halfway house being inadequate. I said, we have a beautiful golf course, a beautiful club, beautiful suites, beautiful cottages, the best caddy program, the best driving range, and we have a mediocre, it wasn't terrible, a mediocre little halfway house. We have to do better. We should blah, blah. For 24 years, I had the same complaint. I lectured for 24 years. And finally, Ed McMahon and George Cantrell became the head of the trustees and the treasurer. And I went to them and I said, boys, please, can you do this while I'm alive? I don't want to give the money in my will. Can you do it while I'm alive and can still enjoy this? So 24 years later, then they said to me, oh, we're not going to do an assessment. You're going to pay all of it. I said, this club has 400 members. It has members like Michael Jordan. It has members that are industrialists. It's got young hotshots like Rob Ellsworth. If we have 400 members, my net worth is 397th. And you bastards are having me pay all of it. So anyway, it's a great halfway house, one of the best in America. Go ahead.
I can't wait to get out to RTJ.
Yeah. Rob will get you out.
Rob's promised to get me out. I think coming in October, so I'm excited about that. If not
you'll
sooner,
get-
maybe
you'll get
sooner.
Cory, weren't
Yeah,
you
the
at the
last
MG
couple years.
tournament?
Unfortunately, by the time we got done with our match, all the Avery wings were gone. I was a little sad this past year. So
We'll have more for you. And Matt is going to come this year as well, and they'll get to meet you in person. And we'll probably film one of these
Wayne had to
episodes
babysit
from
me a
the
couple
MG Cup.
MG Cups
Maybe a
ago
couple.
because I was half passed out at the bar on espresso martinis. So
Matt, he had Ellsworth got a ice sculpture,
Okay.
and the ice sculpture had a little passageway through the statue, down through the ice blocks, and outside where they put a little spigot, and you would take little small bottles of scotch, mostly scotch, wasn't it, Rob?
Yeah, some form of whiskey.
Yeah, whiskey, and you would pour it into the top of the ice statue, and it would burble down and go through the ice and come out, and you would get over to the side and you would suck from the spigot. You'd suck it from the spigot. It was good. It was really cold and it was really good.
That sounds a little classier than the keg stands people used to do at Woodview Golf Course, where Cory and I grew up playing. So it's good stuff.
Well, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I've become known for the putt across the bridge contest at RTJ, where if you don't make it across this long walking bridge between the 12th and 13th holes, it's hard to do, and most people their first time embarrass themselves and they have to shotgun a beer on the spot. If they don't make it across the second time, they have to give their caddy $20 on the spot. And those are my variations on the game. But I have to admit publicly, and this will be the only time I admit it, I copied the game from Wayne Valis. He is the originator of the putt across the bridge.
I can't do it anymore. My body doesn't work anymore. But yeah, I did that. Rob improved. I got to tell you, I got Rob into the club. I moved up to senior status. Now I'm honorary because of all the money I'm given and stuff. But I had to get someone to replace me as a member, and I got Ellsworth. And they asked me lots of stuff about him, and I said, just get him in, all right? And he has been the best member, and he has put out more money into the club than any other member by a long, long shot. And we've had great members, not just Michael Jordan, guys like Vernon Jordan, and it's really big. Someday we'll do a story about Vernon when we have time.
Wayne, I'm very grateful to you for getting me in, and I made the decision the very first time you took me as a guest. I'd never seen anything quite like it, and very grateful to you for not just RTJ but Crail and
and I'm
Andrews.
shocked to know that you're not at the St. Andrews Golf Club and you don't have a yearly ticket. I'll try to work on those.
Wow, you're the best. You're the best.
Well, should we get into the shotgun nine? If Cory or Rob, if you guys want to lead it off, we'll just kind of take turns asking. These are questions. They're meant to be one-word answers or short answers, and we'll end our podcast with this.
So, I'll start.
Okay.
In their prime, Tiger or Jack?
For a short period of time, Tiger, but for a career, Jack. Arnold Palmer did an interview about Tiger just before he died, and he said that the Tiger who played while his dad was alive, while Earl was there to guide him and press him, was the best golfer ever in that short period of time. Once Earl died, Arnold believes something went out of Tiger and things started happening that
women.
Best golf course.
Next. That was a way
how
too
about
long
best
answer,
golf course in the U.S. that you've played, not named Pinecrest or RTJ?
Cyprus.
As a historian, what is the best Reagan biography?
this guy Shirley has done quite a two-part biography. It's the most detailed. I can't remember his name. His last name is Shirley. Okay. Rendezvous with Destiny and some other books, but they're very long. It's like it was like his life work.
Okay. Let's see here, Wayne. Live Golf and Greg Norman, good for the game or bad for the game?
I didn't like it originally, but I think it is going to turn out to be good for the game. Now the players get much more share of the money than they ever used to. And the PJs had to jack up their stuff, and I think golf is in a really good place right now. You know, we had COVID and do this. Mr. Snead beat me up pretty good, telling me about how he was born in the wrong period of American history. He told me that I won me 130 golf tournaments, and I finished second in about 150. He said I won me $650,000. He wasn't happy.
How about favorite House member and favorite senator currently?
My favorite, let me tell you somebody who I really admire, who I didn't admire. Mike Johnson. I knew nothing about Mike Johnson, except that he was kind of a nobody from Shreveport. And when he was a freshman, his only thing that he did was to have a code of civility. He proposed that they have a sense of the House to have a code of civility. And I went, wow, a Trump guy, a code of civility. If only they could do this. Then he did that. Now he's done what he's done. You know, he's defied the crazies. He's defied the crazies. Now I just hope that the Democrats are not going to vote with the crazies to decapitate him. So
why is everyone looking at me?
And the Senate, I've got a lot of friends, Jerry Moran, John Bozeman. I've got soon. I've got lots of people I've known and worked with, and it would be like, which child do you love? I mean, there's a whole lot of them. I mean, the Senate's, it's adults. It's an adult place, not like the House. There's a lot of good Democrats as well.
You could put together a dream foursome and had to be one celebrity, one professional golfer, and one president, living or dead. What is your dream foursome?
My dream foursome would be Walter Hagen as a golfer. What was next? A celebrity?
Celebrity.
My celebrity. So a celebrity golfer. Hey. Probably Dean Martin.
From Rob's hometown of Steubenville, Ohio.
Either Dean Martin or Dean Martin or Clint Eastwood.
And president?
Ooh, well, Reagan only played golf 1.5 times a year, and Ford was probably though Herbert Walker. I think.
Okay. Most Americans, when they travel to Scotland, try to play the old course, Carnoustie, Kingsbarns. Give us one course that they should add to their trip and one pub or restaurant.
Those are easy. The Balcomie course at Crail, right on the tip of Fife, that was put in 1895 by old Tom Morris. The club paid him £6 to do the course. It's all on the ocean. There's 7 holes that are really on the ocean, hard on the North Sea. If you hit a ball to the right and you go into the North Sea, you have to take a drop in Denmark. And then all the other holes, the other 11 holes are all ocean view courses. And then, of course, my favorite pub is the Dunvegan pub It's been around for quite a while. It's mobbed. You can't get in. The food is pretty good. It was taken over by a Texan named Jack Willoughby about 30 some years ago. He married a young, tiny little Scottish girl from Aberdeen, and they made it an American. They have Tex-Mex stuff. They have Texas country music. I was there a week after they opened it. I said, Jack, the steaks are terrible here. The hamburgers are terrible. He said, don't worry, you'll soon see. And it's the best. It's the best golf sports bar in the world. More players go there. They're mob. I met Arnie there. I was part of that gallery, his last gallery. This is when he was over 80, and he went around and he quit at the turn. It was very sad. There were about 1,000 of us, and he quit. It was a cold, blustery day, and he couldn't play anymore. And he said, the old horse is done. I have to go into the barn.
What do you think? What are your goals and hopes that you want to come out of this 2024 elections? What do you think ultimately, like, you want to see happen in terms of? I know we've talked about civility, so
what I would rather have happen? Well, that's hard for me to say because I'm still working, but probably if the House went Democrat and the Senate went Republican, I'd be probably happy.
Well, last question we ask all of our guests is, who's going to be sworn in on January 20th, 2025? Who's going to be our next president?
If I had to bet, I'd say Biden.
Okay. Well, Wayne, I can just tell you, this has been an incredible experience. Every one of these episodes we've done so far, it's just been like a dream come true.
Yeah, you've had Marty and you've had Nay, right?
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really thankful for Rob and Cory for agreeing to do this, and I'm thankful for you to take up 2 hours to talk with us. This has just been amazing.
Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Oh my!
But I mean, you just can go on and on because you have so many great stories.
I want to thank you three guys, and you made me violate my cardinal rule. You know,
You have a rule. You have a rule.
I have a rule. I worked for Richard Nixon. He had to resign to avoid impeachment. And why? Because he spoke into electronic devices. And you three got me to speak into this electronic device.
Well, thank you for doing. I know if no one else listens to it, I'm going to cherish this recording forever. So thank you so much. And
all right, guys.
This has been a lot of fun. Look forward to meeting you at RTJ someday.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks.